Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. We are here to share our presentation on reporting structures. You'll be hearing from me, affirmative action today. My name is Anneke McEvoy, she, hers.
Julie Bezek, Deputy Title IX Coordinator, she, hers.
She, her. Lisa Evaneski, Title IX Coordinator.
Starr Wheeler, ADA Compliance Officer, she, hers.
And so here we are, and we're going to tell you a little bit about why we're together before we tell you about our individual areas. So again, as I said, I'm the Affirmative Action Officer, the Deputy CDIO. I started in November last year. Prior to that, I'd spent some time working as a part-time Title IX coordinator Deputy Coordinator with Lisa. And learned a lot observing Lisa's structures, her practices, her process, her infallible, always consistent process.
President of my fan club. Okay. Just for self-disclosure. Yeah.
I was aware of Starr off in her universe, knowing her things, because whenever you raised a question about ADA compliance or what to do around accommodations, people would invoke Starr and her expertise. So kind of aware of that. We got Julie last summer, just a lucky break for Lisa to get a full-time deputy finally, and somebody with a long history in student advocacy and support, and also with familiarity with Title IX investigations, the real ticket here. So here we are. And then one day we became a family.
That's the day we all became. Bunch.
But there's some logic to I'm kind of talking a little non-linearly, or very linearly actually, because I started in fast, about how we became really a compliance team in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So really, because new things are happening and we're kind of recognizing the resource we each are to having a more inclusive and compliant campus. So I mentioned Lisa's process and her investigation experience also, because I think some of those structures have really informed our thinking as a campus. What I actually left out also, because I know we have a member in the group in the presentation,
audience.
Grace Maxon Clark here from our bias prevention and response team, which is really another arm of this process, though not housed in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. But we, as a campus, have been transitioning into this kind of more transparent, intentional era around recognizing our responsibilities to our community and creating structures to help us stay accountable, help us stay informed, help people feel included and welcomed and supported in the space, students, faculty, and staff. So I think that's enough of the background for how we all came together. And I think we're going to kick off with Title IX. So Lisa's going to take it from here.
Oh yeah, we're actually going to, we'll go to the next slide. We want to start with, what do you need to know? And you can either, unmute and ask out loud, or type it in the chat, and John will let us know what's what. Are there things that you just are surprised by just from our introduction? Are there things you need to know about how to help employees or how to help students, coworkers, things like that? What do you need to know? We want to make sure that we cover that today in addition to what we've prepared.
Michelle says, just wondering if there are any major changes on reporting.
Okay, so yes, there will be. So we will get to that. Thank you. That's a good one. Any other ones? And you can ask questions throughout. We don't need them all right now, but we wanted to make sure, because not knowing, necessarily who was coming, we wanted to be open to kind of just changing things up. Any other questions before we move to the next slide? And then we can always ask questions as we go. Okay.
And feel free to unmute to do that.
Yeah. It's a small enough group. Okay, so I'll start. My stuff is pretty well known to many of you that are in the audience, but there have been some and will be some more changes. So I can kind of talk through that. I've started lately breaking the stuff I'm doing down into 3 different categories. So the first category is sexual and interpersonal violence. This is the stuff you probably think of the most. A lot of people think about sexual assault in Title IX hand in hand, but our policies include dating, domestic violence, and stalking. Domestic violence is twice. It's that much of a problem. So that's the one area, sexual and interpersonal violence. Also sex discrimination. And this section is going to change and grow even more with the new Title IX regs that are out now, and we're waiting on updated documentation and policies and forms and things like that from SUNY Central. But it's going to expand. And there's a lot in the new Title IX regs that talk about not only gender-based violence and sex-based violence, but there's even use of words like sexism and things like that. So under sex discrimination falls sexism, sexual harassment, anything based on gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation. So that's the other category. And then we've kind of teased this one out a little separate from all of that, is discrimination based on pregnancy and parenting and any related conditions. So for example, if somebody needs abortion care, if somebody has any sort of medical condition from anything from beginning to end based on pregnancy and parenting. Title IX has always had a piece of assisting students that are pregnant and parenting. The employee side has really always more fallen on the affirmative action and non-discrimination statement as one of the protected classes. So we've always had that in place for employees, but now we're going to have more. We're going to have more information, more expectations, more accommodations, more, supportive measures, things like that for employees as well. It's always been there for students, but not as clarified as what we're getting now for the future. So what I'm telling people, and I recently sent some, if you know me, I send scary emails sometimes. Don't mean them to be. They're just trying to be clear. Just kind of letting some of the high leadership, on our campus know if you get any reports like this, they need to come to me so we can help people. And as the law kind of changes and becomes effective on August 1st, we're going to need to do more, and it's the right thing to do. So those are the categories of things you want to send to me. And if you're lucky enough to not have a lot of these cases end up on your desk or in your world, that's great. And I think that's also why people kind of forget the types of things to report. So in terms of, reporting, that has not changed since 2013. I encourage everyone to report to me directly. You don't have to go through supervisory chains, but you can always give a heads up to a supervisor or tell us both at the same time. I still find myself every probably month reminding someone about that you really shouldn't wait. It shouldn't take much longer. You should always be pushing it, to me directly so we can start the process of helping people through whatever they're going through. Our website has information, but really the consistent way that people have always reached out to me is through email. So that's the way to do that. Our policies are both on the Title IX website. There are a few other policies linked from there, but we do have 2 existing policies. One is the Title IX grievance policy, and the other one is the sexual and interpersonal violence policy. And the reason we have 2 is just one name, Betsy DeVos. we have a need to keep those 2 policies separate because since Title IX has become rule of law, we have to keep it separate in case it changes every 4 years or every 8 years. So we are going to maintain 2 separate policies for that reason. All right, so let me tell you about reporting options, and then I'll stop so my friends can tell you about their areas. We do have informal and formal reporting options. A lot of times when I get cases like, this person keeps showing up where I am, I don't know if it's stalking, stuff like that, I would offer them a solution of, would you like me to talk to the person first? Would you like me to just check in and make sure there isn't something going on, and maybe they just need to be told, like, stay away from this person? That's typically what an informal option would be. It wouldn't require a full report. It wouldn't require an investigation, but it also wouldn't allow for any sort of discipline, against a student or an employee. So if someone's choosing an informal option, it means I'm still helping them with a lot of stuff. And I'm going to help them through whatever's happening, but they're not necessarily going through a full investigation. So that's my piece. I think that's good for now as a foundation of Title IX. And let's see who's next. Do you want to say anything else?
Before we...
Oh, we could, sure. Anyone have any questions? And also think about it this way. If you have any questions about how we have greatly improved our investigation process with the arrival of Julie Bezek last June, feel free to ask those questions as well. Seeing none? Okay.
Okay, so speaking as the affirmative action officer, my primary concern is discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, creed, age, familial status, predisposing genetic characteristics, including an individual's ancestry, country of origin, or country of origin of parents, family members, or ancestors, military status, criminal conviction, or any other characteristic protected by applicable local, state, or federal law.
It's a lot of words.
Yep. Lisa's area of focus does fall into our non-discrimination policy, but is separate as an area that is mandated as Title IX management, right? Response. And it's interesting because for Lisa's area, the mandated response is so specific, and the mandated kind of the resources around definitions and understanding are so specific. From where a hand is it over the clothing or under the clothing, would determine how something is classified. And even her response that she, in fact, has to be the person to provide interim measures. Like, it's so specific what's mandated for Lisa. Not quite so for me. But I think the trickiest thing that I'm navigating in my area, especially right now in this particular moment, is the interplay of First Amendment rights and Title VI protections. So really all these protected classes we're talking about in terms of our non-discrimination policy are things protected under Title VI. I'm also concerned with Title VII, which is discrimination, workplace discrimination, based on the same characteristics. I can speak to that in a second. I'll focus on just discrimination, what happens if somebody feels they've been discriminated against based on any of these defining characteristics. So Lisa talked about having an informal and a formal process. In my area, we also have an informal and a formal process. The informal process really is managed by our bias prevention and response team. Shout out to Grace Maxon Clark there in the audience. And we've linked in this presentation, and we can share this with you afterward. But hopefully you're familiar. We're doing more and more to kind of help folks know how to report a bias-related incident. We have a form that currently lives on the Student Affairs website for reporting bias, experiences of bias. And the range can be wide. You know, it can be somebody said something that I felt was connected to my identity and it made me feel unwelcome, to I feel like I'm not allowed to speak in class because of my gender, to my roommate used a racial slur with me. I mean, the mind reels at the possibilities. But BPRT, the bias reporting form, is a great starting point to get your concern in front of somebody. Bias prevention and response team has broad representation. I'm on it, Lisa's on it, Grace Maxon Clark is on it, Sarah Rebior is on it, Kathleen Kerr is on it, Kendra Cadogan's on it, and I'm so
Kristen Croyle.
Kristen Croyle is on it. Reports don't come to everybody. Reports come to me and Christy Huynh, who is also on it. And I think Kendra might be flagged on them as well. And then we determine how things should be routed. So if something is happening in the res halls, it might make sense for Sarah Rebior to be the person that's channeled to. if a Title IX related incident comes through this reporting platform, then we would obviously send it over to Lisa. So it's kind of an informal reporting management system, and responses look different. It might be, I had an instance recently where a student felt that a staff member had racially profiled them. So I reached out and talked to the student and then said, maybe, why don't we bring that person in for a conversation? And then the student said, well, I'd like my parent to be a part of that conversation as well. And then we did that. And that allowed the staff member to kind of unfold the context of what had taken place. It allowed the student to share their concerns and experience of what had taken place. And it allowed us to come to a resolution of everyone kind of feeling like they understood each other and understood what was going to be happening moving forward, right? Pretty informal. But everyone expressed satisfaction with that outcome. Something might require more response than that, more intervention. That can happen in the BPRT space, again, depending on the nature of the incident. We also have a formal allegation of unlawful discrimination. So you might pass go and go right to that, depending on the nature of your experience. Those reports come directly to me and only to me. I review it, I share it with Julie Bezek here, and we determine whether or not a formal investigation will take place. Formal investigations in this area are new for this campus. And I think
in this way,
we've had longstanding affirmative action officers. Again, Lisa and I both spent a lot of years working with Howard Gordon. Cannot fault Howard. But for this particular moment in time, I think some transparency is really helpful and some really clear understanding of what's going to happen if I make a report. So that's what we're trying to build together. And by doing a formal investigation, you're really even allowing the respondent to understand what the allegations are. And then as you're kind of determining the outcome, walking them through, this has happened and this is why this is happening, or this is why this is not happening. So it just gives everybody a little bit more of a foothold in understanding what took place and what the consequences of what took place can and will be. So I feel like there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, so that's really focusing on Title VI, our reporting processes. This is really about reporting processes, so I'm not going to talk a lot about Title VII, but even that process can be something where somebody feels they're experiencing discrimination, right? And again, these same reporting structures are in place for that. And I think that's it. What do you think?
Yeah, I wanted to also comment because you said something that I think is really helpful. When someone reports something through Title IX, the only people who see it are myself and Julie, and it comes to her kind of from the case management perspective, and also in case there's an investigation, and it comes to me. We don't have a secretary or administrative assistant or anyone else to help us with that, so it doesn't go anywhere else. No one else sees it. Even in supervisory ways, when we update Kendra about things, we don't share names unless the situation is really escalating and she might need to know that. We don't share name. I might say I'm working on, in fact, that's what we do. Julie and I send her a report every week that says, received 6 cases, 2 were employees, 4 were students, things like that. She doesn't even get the details unless something's really out of control and could be an impact to our community, which hardly ever happens. So I think that's important.
Ooh, one other thing, speaking of outside our community, that I did not include in the presentation, but that I am required to share, is there are also reporting processes outside our campus. You can you can file a discrimination, DHR, Department of Human Rights, or an OCR, Office of Civil Rights, complaint. And links to that are on our website, currently on the HR site. But again, I swear to God, I think even maybe by the end of this week, the ODI and compliance team websites will be up and running. And then I'm going to add one more thing before I hand it off to Starr, which is just to say the piece that we lucked out with in this space is Starr, bringing Starr over from working solely with students to working campus-wide on ADA compliance. her knowledge base is astounding and so helpful in navigating a lot of these spaces in terms of determining whether or not something is discrimination or whether or not we're in compliance or out. So that's my little intro to send it over to Starr. Save your questions for the end.
Jeez, what an introduction.
It's true.
Jeez,
You're on mute.
I need to be right after that. All right, so for those of you that don't know, I am now my role has morphed into full-time ADA compliance, which has been wonderful. It's been, I've only was able to do compliance for about 10% of my workload, and there were a lot of things that I wanted to address and couldn't. So now I have that opportunity. So this has been a wonderful shift. One of the things that I think is important, that if you don't walk away from anything from today's presentation, or I'd like you to remember that accessibility, that's the only word that I really want you to remember. Sorry, guys. But oftentimes, you know, people will come across a push button and they'll be like, hey, the push button's not working. They just walk through the door. It's really important that all of you are like out there, you know, watching, having eyes out there, because I can't be everywhere. So things like a push button, things like microphones, you know, we all attend these meetings and, you know, we're given the opportunity to use microphones, but oftentimes we'll say, you know what, I don't need a microphone. There's a reason that we're given those. And I think it's really important that we start as an institution using those. No matter what the situation is, there's, you know, with 1 in 10, I mean, it's probably a lot less than that now, having disabilities, you don't know in that room who may need to have you use a microphone. You know, so I think for me, one of the things with accessibility is that, you know, it's really important. You know, I've been pulled now into, I'm working more with like our facilities, our design and construction, you know, our coordinators and things like that, you know, to help us get to a place of compliance. You know, we're moving forward. We just had our accessible route go live on our website, which means now you can go on our website and you can follow an accessible route. Sorry, Grace, I couldn't get it printed for you, but I do think it's awesome. We've, you know, I've only been in this position a few months, and what we've accomplished in those few months, I just can't believe. We have also added accessible bathrooms. We've gone through and counted parking spaces to make sure we are in full compliance with the number of handicapped parking spaces. So, you know, for me, when it comes to reporting, you know, I'm not necessarily discrimination, but I'm more of the accessibility. You know, if you come across anything, you know, it's important that you either call 3200, email me. I just had a phone installed last week, so I'll be, hey guys, you know, within 2 weeks I've had a computer and a phone. I'm very excited, and so I will be updating with that as well. But you know, I think it's important anytime you come across anything like that. And, you know, again, push buttons, elevators, anything that you see that's a barrier. Now, this one's going to sound funny, but we actually had snow plowed one time in front of a ramp. You know,
I was just thinking of that. I was going to ask about that.
It's just a matter of people not realizing, you know, they're moving snow for one group and blocking another. And, you know, anything like that, reach out to me. I'll address it. I'll take care of it. You know, or call 3200. They're like my best friend there.
And Michelle says, amazing work. As I did college tours with a boot on her foot, she realized how important it is and how much better we do.
Oh, yay.
Yeah,
good job.
We're trying, and we have some things, you know, we're still making changes. I've been working with facilities on tracking like our concern areas, like elevators being down, to see where we need to shift our focus. You know, we're looking at mainstreaming communication so that when there is an outage, everybody gets notified, not just a certain group of people. And then our biggest thing that we're looking to transition, stay tuned, is we will be transitioning employee accommodations over to our office.
So I will be providing those, hopefully by the end of the summer is our goal. So we've got some exciting things happening, at least for me. I think it's exciting and moving forward. So again, if you have any, the one word I want you to remember, accessibility. So if you bring in a speaker, you know, I can help with that. We have checklists we've created. There's lots of people that can help. Always remember accessibility.
Awesome. I think, yeah. And I think one thing I was thinking about when you were talking is about the snow. Like I do a lot of programming on campus. I drag my little cart all over the place. And so, you know, just thinking about it from, you know, from your perspective, that's something I could do, you know, if I'm trying to drag my cart somewhere and something isn't working anymore. And I think you downplayed your accessibility map a little. I want to just mention one of the things that came out of us coming together as we're hashtag Fab4 now. I know someone else used it before, but I don't know. You know, but we're just discovering things that, you know, because people don't exist by themselves with one issue, right? We could have people with intersecting accessibility issues, intersecting identities. Like there could be a lot of things going on for someone. I think one of the other important things that we did is coming together as a team and pulling out some of the functions that might be in HR, might be in another area, are getting them out of the place where people might also have to, you know, deal with discipline or might have to deal with other types of services for students and employees, and really having a place where they can say, hey, I think I need more help with this, or I think this isn't being done right. And they can come to us to ask for help. And it's not going necessarily to a supervisor or to someone who can determine employment or something like that. The other thing I don't know if we covered is, you know, we all now are in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I know you kind of mentioned it, but, you know, we all have, well, the exception of Julie, because I'm still her supervisor, but we all essentially report to Kendra. And having all of these functional areas, we came up with this compliance committee. We initially were just like, oh, I think that'd be great if we meet to check in. And now we're meeting every week and we're actually making a lot of progress.
We have a lot to do.
We have a lot to do.
Every meeting we're like, and then let's.
And we have a list because we are realizing some of these things like, wow, you know, this would be more helpful to employees if we had this, or this would be more helpful to students or just to everyone. So now that we have all of our functional areas under one person and one office, it's actually already producing great things. And the handout I sent to John, in case you want to put that in the chat, I don't know if it's chatable, but you could also email it if you want. We have a draft form of our reporting pathways. It is very new, and we will work with our communication and marketing department to try and make it pretty. But we have that going on, and we're working on, you know, some of the kind of cross policy. We're crosswalking policies and looking at, you know, where's this mentioned? Where else is it mentioned? Things like that. And even coming
what
up,
legislation is driving
what legislation is driving it
to policy. Laws and policy,
yeah.
And then how does that connect to our processes?
Right, and become functional. Yeah. So I think that's really important too. I thought of something else, but I'll let someone else talk.
Oh, I have one more thing. And again, listening to Starr talk about all the physical realities of compliance, right? But also there's the kind of, I'll call it the soft skill or the informed piece of understanding what it looks like, understanding our rights and responsibilities, understanding what we do and don't do. And also for our constituents, be they students, faculty, or staff, to understand what's available for me, you know, and who can I trust to talk to. And so, so Starr said she wants you to remember accessibility. I just want you to remember Starr.
Wait, are you president of her fan club now? Like, what's happening?
I just need a hat that says I'm a fan.
I'm a fan.
But no, I think, you know, I'm excited for the expertise that I get to work with.
And we do have a lot of fun doing it.
And I think intention's the thing too. So Starr and I are looking at legislation coming down that's already happened. It's called Executive Order 31. That's really about how all funded entities in the state deal with recruiting and supporting people with disabilities.
And we've already begun networking in Oswego County to hire individuals with disabilities.
Yeah. So there's that piece. There's also a huge professional development piece to that. Lisa with the new regs is looking at.
So one of the other things coming, this is crazy, y'all. So Title IX is now going to require us to have every employee trained every year on Title IX. So don't worry, I'm going to make it reasonable, but we're working on that now, but every employee. So I don't think for the first year, it's going to go under that kind of collection of things that HR has to send out. At least not for the first year, because it's not going to be ready for that. But we will be offering in-person opportunities, certainly asynchronous opportunities. So there'll be a lot of different ways that you can get that done and brief enough. Questions, John?
Yes, there's one from Cassie. Are all student workers supposed to be trained in Title IX?
Okay, so here's the easy answer. Not necessarily. But I will say that Student Affairs specifically, when we first started doing all of this training, was very supportive back in 2011 to allow us to get to their students and make sure they knew. A lot of times student workers, and so some student employees, that could come out of that, where SUNY might say, this includes student employees. We are waiting for a little bit more clarity from them. But right now, it's not necessarily all student employees, but there are a lot of categories, like certainly resident assistants, desk attendants, things like that. If you have students that are working in a facility where things could go wrong, right? Like in campus rec, are we calling it that now? I don't remember. Whatever your department's called now. We have people that could be touching each other by mistake or not by mistake, so those kinds of things could be happening. Often we do great training with our campus center employees, student employees, because they're in a hub of students, employees, and third parties where anything could be reported to them. So my answer is always yes, sort of, is how I would say it. But I think it's a good idea. It's just not as intense right now, but it could become an issue. Yes.
And for our area, or for Starr's area, but the larger AAO area as well, our guidance thus far has been that for Executive Order 31, which we are getting ready to launch into, student workers count as employees.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and you have to have similar training, all employees.
Yeah.
So watch for new trainings.
Yeah. Which is a great opportunity though. I mean, when I think about accessibility and I think about students who might hear it one way in one space and then hear it another way as an employee.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to help folks be more informed and hopefully more empowered to seek out accommodations they might need. I think, and again, with transparency. We want folks to not feel like there will be repercussions for disclosing, for example, an invisible disability, that support is here for you. We recognize it, and it's separate from the HR processes. It is its own thing to make sure you have the support you need.
That's actually another good point. John, any more questions come in?
I'll follow up. So there will be student training in all your areas, is a question.
Yes. Actually, we literally are developing. It's like the next big exciting thing after like this framework and this chart that we figured out is a campus-wide professional development action plan. Kind of all encompassing. And figuring out how to make it as sustainable and accessible for everybody. And I don't just mean, I mean accessible in all senses. Like we're not trying to kill everyone's schedules, or overburden them. And we don't want it to be something where you just kind of click past and just don't do. We want the campus to learn together about our areas. Short speech.
That made a big difference for us when we created Title IX training. And then we were like, oh, we don't get any of these cases. And then we were like, oops, yes, we do. And it grew and grew and grew because of that. And now people report things to us that are minor enough. And so we're actually able, from a prevention standpoint, be able to have those conversations with people about, yeah, it's really not good to talk about porn at work, And so I think people, are like, oh, I should talk to someone in Title IX about this. And it's great. And it's been helpful in hopefully preventing things from getting worse. Other questions,
Stay
John?
tuned for more trainings.
You're welcome.
But efficient trainings, not hours and hours. So one thing to also share, I know we don't have a lot of questions and we're good here. Allison, do you have any questions?
No,
okay.
I'm just listening.
I lost that thought. Oh, in terms of Julie's role, I think it's important. I don't know if you want to talk about just the types of investigations.
Absolutely. So I have a dual investigator role. So I investigate complaints that fall under the umbrella of Title IX, and also working with Anneke on ones that fall under discrimination, particularly illegal forms of discrimination. Prior to me coming and this being a full-time investigator, deputy Title IX coordinator position, we had wonderful, amazing volunteer.
Some are on this call.
Some of them are on this call. And volunteer investigators who were taking a huge task on of investigating these cases, which again, these are individuals who have their own positions and full-time jobs and things.
Very busy.
And then we're taking that on. And what we were finding, what Lisa was finding was that, investigations were just by the nature of them. You've got, 2 volunteers coordinating schedules, working, doing these things, and that they were taking, longer, and a longer amount of time, still within, the guidelines that have been set by, federal and state requirements. Very important, still within those guidelines that to do that. But now, being able to have a, dedicated full-time investigator, it's been able, things to streamline the process, consistency of that process, and also just much more timeliness because of the focus area that has been allowed, that this position allows now when dealing with complaints, whether they're coming out of the Title IX world or coming out of affirmative action / discrimination complaints as well. So that's, I would say, one piece. And I'm also for either that employee or that student. It's nice for them to have one point of contact within the office when they're dealing with a complaint, when they've filed a formal investigation complaint, to be able to have one, person that to be able to walk them through that process and help them through, and then, get that investigation done as timely as possible, and then get it off to whether it be student conduct, human resources, auxiliary services, just depending on where it falls in our campus, and get that to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. Any other questions for us? We didn't know we were going to have such list of our fans here. Hi, Lizette. I didn't know you were there either. Have fun. Yay. Any surprises? And this is a good time if you have questions about our investigations, or kind of, we have a lot of goals going forward. Excited about that.
And I guess I just have a comment about the proactiveness of it. I love how much in your face you guys are with the information that you have forthcoming. And I think that's very helpful for people to know that. You know, professional staff, students, but also people who may not necessarily come forth and say anything, like people who work in facilities and things like that. For those people who feel comfortable and confident and being encouraged by other employees to go ahead and speak out. I think that's very important. So I love the work you guys are doing.
Thank you. And I think we noticed, maybe not on purpose, but there wasn't really a lot of transparency about some of the other stuff. Everyone would say things like, well, yeah, we know about Title IX, but what about everything else? And I think recognizing that, and just by the nature of us coming together and meeting weekly to talk about these different, kind of what's a mandate, what's a recommendation, what's actual law, rule of law, and I think just being able to encourage each other and support each other, and even helping find resources of things like, oh, there's a really cool thing on the SUNY Central website, said someone, I'm sure at some point in life. But sorry, active audience, you know, our full-time job is trying to get laughs. But you know, I think this has been really great, and just, you know, we're just excited to make it more available for people who might need to talk to someone and don't feel safe talking to someone. So that's been really important to us.
Because there was a point in time where there was not a bias response form. There was the suggestion on the website that if you feel you've experienced discrimination, contact University Police.
Yeah.
Then we had a bias form. But then when I would tell students in orientation, you know, if you feel you've witnessed or experienced discrimination in any way, you know, complete this form. And they would say, well, then what happens? And I was like, well, I don't know. So then we got the bias prevention and response team and really spent time. And I have to credit Grace and her thoughtfulness in this too. Like, I just feel like we spent time building what the communication around that would be and what that process could look like. You know, but then also recognizing there are some complaints that go beyond that space as well, where we need something, which we've always actually had the formal process.
We've had it, but did we talk about it?
Well, it used to live, you know, the non-discrimination procedure is a PDF that lived, that the last 3 pages were the complaint form. So you'd have to click on the PDF and download the PDF and fill out the form, and then, I don't know, mail it to somebody. So well, actually, we should still check it first. So now it lives as a Google form, linkable currently from HR, but any day now from the ODI website, any day. Content's there, just trying to make it pretty.
So I would just say, while you're thinking about how to do all the trainings for everybody, as much as I hate the 6 trainings that come through and it's the same thing over and over again, the consistency that everybody is getting, that I think is so important, because we go through spurts on this campus where we train on something and we do this big training, and then it sort of fizzles away and it just doesn't, and it's hard to keep that up when it's not a brand new training, right? And you've got people that come and go regularly. So if we can figure out a way to add some of the information into those types of, I don't know about those types, let's be clear. I'm not sure I love the delivery, but some sort of regular, consistent training for students and staff, I think, and faculty. I think it at least make sure that everybody's getting that information.
Getting it, yeah.
You know, and we go through the same thing with the adjunct, you know, different employee trainings, new faculty orientations and things. Well, things change and we update those new people, but then the old people we don't get back to. So it's such a moving target that any way that we can make those more consistent, I think, is really important. And I want to put out to EOP for some of the stuff, their work they're doing on the accessibility stuff. And they're taking the stance of it should be accessible for everybody, regardless of who we have coming to campus. And I talked when I was at the admissions in the other colleges. I was like, you know, if you just made all the college tours accessible, you wouldn't have to be scrambling to find an accessible route for this group, you know. And it was sort of one of those aha moments. So
we'll send you on the next tour with Starr's cards.
Perfect. I'm happy to do it. I have to run those. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
If anyone has any thoughts about whether or not we put this in Brightspace as a no-term course, we're also talking about that. And we have talked to HR about, could we get, you know, some of these trainings in on that system? So we're going to have to look and see, not knowing if we can do it for the first year, but for sure we'll look at that, because we had that same kind of concern that, you know, sending people to all these different places. So I think that is something we'll look at. We minimally might just start with a Brightspace course and then direct everyone there, but that's not accessible for everyone either. You know, it's just hard for certain groups to maybe get in there and understand how that system works. So for sure, we're looking at all of those options. We're coming to the end. Any burning questions? I'm a Gemini from California. We can do an icebreaker. Just kidding.
All right, so
I think we're good.
I think that brings us to the end of our program. Thanks, everybody, and stay tuned.
And send us any questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So funny.